Desirability is not tied to just sex. Desirability manifests itself in so many more ways than just sexuality. It's just a really powerful way from our culture. And so when you're delighted in, you're desired in, you're longed for, that's something that should light you up. That comes from when you were little, right? When you walk home, your parent goes, "You're here," right? That's like your partner in adulthood and sex saying, "I want you." There's a lot of satisfaction that comes from someone delighting in you and longing for you and wanting you. In fact, that's one of the things that drives men to pornography. It's that one of the most powerful psychological elements of pornographic use is not about the images, it's about the delight of the person wanting them badly. It's really seductive. Pornography is obviously very seductive, and it's a wooing and desiring and a wanting, and then an experiencing a pleasure that the man imagines that he is giving the woman that's experiencing the pleasure. The man puts himself in the image of the man in the pornography, or the woman, and imagines himself offering that kind of pleasure and having that kind of response, which is very attachment. Longing for this kind of delight and approval, and like, I'm that amazing that you're lighting up for me. It's not a whole lot different than coming home from school. Right? And people, men who experience a high correlation between men who experience a lot of neglect and turn into sexual objects. Because they're looking for psychological being to be lit up by a woman. They want to light up somebody. And so they lean into some of that. In fact, I have two images for my sexual addicts that I show them. And one image is of sort of body parts. It's not, I mean, what a horrible thing for me to do, to show sexual images to my addicts. But it's like a shadow of body parts, and then I show a seductive face. You know, like the tongue over the teeth, with that look of desire. And I said, tell me which one activates your sexual system the most. And about 80% of them say the face. It's not about the body parts. With the ones that say the body parts, because when the body parts are inviting, that psychological need is still being met. But the face, that phase of wanting and desiring, I mean, I don't want to get too psychoanalytic, but it's like this desire to want to be wanted. Lights you up, you see that face, they're wanting you, and there's these psychological needs that are desperately being met. You want someone to want you that bad. And so, it's really common. Okay. So here's another thing that gets in the way of homosexuality. Dishonoring our natural rhythms and life demands. Okay, so here is the female menstrual cycle. Over here represents levels of arousal, and this represents lifespan, or the 17 days or the 28 days of the female cycle. So of these days, 17 days of the 28 days are low desire naturally. Just a natural low desire within the female menstrual cycle, 17 days of the 32. That's over half of the days, right? So during premenstrual, it lands, around 6 or so, then it takes a quick drop, 3 to 6 days, starts working its way out, days 16 to 13. 13 to 16 is at its highest during ovulation, the natural female response sexually. And then it takes a deep drop during 16 to 28 days. Right? So for men, you know what it looks like? For most men, it looks like that. There's no up and down. So natural arousal only happens in very few days. I mean, this is 13 to 16 days where you're sitting up here. That's not a lot of days, right? That's 3 days of natural female arousal from the body. Not psychological, but biological arousal. So what is this? Why is this good for a man? From an attachment perspective.
Regulates their desires.
Right, regulates their desires, yep, and it increases attunement. The sexual rhythms of a female increases the male attunement to the female body. Right, times when the female body is prepared for sexuality, times when the female body is not ready for sexuality, and so therefore you don't put pressure on the female body to respond in ways that it's not ready to respond to. How sensitive is that? Right? This good enough parent, sensitive, attuned, aware of the female body and where the female body is, and how it correlates with how the approach and the withdrawal of the sexuality in the cycle. It also offers every single month times of abstinence What happens, what other intimacies are formed during times of abstinence?
Spiritual, emotional, intellectual.
Yes, spiritual, emotional, intellectual, right? Every month, you gotta do that. You got a period of time in the month where you have to exercise spiritual, emotional, and intellectual intimacy. Because you got nothing else. Right? You can't overemphasize this. Because every month you're reminded, I can't do this, right? So this is interesting. I'm not necessarily saying do this or don't do this, but this is the Catholic argument for natural family planning. Because with contraception, you don't have to be as sensitive to this. There's more days you can have sex, but, right? With contraception, there's less days when you can have sex with natural family planning, and so the attunement to the cycle is really sensitive because for the Catholics, the body matters. You don't want to do anything to the body that distorts the body from its natural rhythms.
Yeah, but for the Catholics, she can't have sex at her peak day.
Right.
Oh,
Which means that.
that's pretty cruel.
Okay, well, not necessarily.
Unless you want to hold it.
Yeah, well, that's true. They just have 12 kids, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's the same point. Here's the other component of this, though, is the psychological element of arousal. Right? So, what's more important, physical or the psychological? Well, they're both about equally important. So, the psychological is really about, I mean, you want to honor the physical arousal, but the psychological arousal is what actually can increase the female arousal system during times of naturally low arousal. So, if there's more consistency in sexuality for couples because the psychological arousal is present during times of low, normal arousal. And so the sex can still be good here if the connection is present. But in the absence of connection, you follow the pattern naturally. Does that make sense? Okay, so let's add lifespan to this. All right, launching, sex levels are, when you leave your home, you get high hormones running, right? Arousal levels are high. Then you get coupling, they're pretty high right off the bat, unless you've been abused or something like that, and then high. Then you go into young children, it takes a deep dive. Yeah, you guys have young children, can you comment on this? Like, you're so tired, and you have babies, right, breastfeeding you, and your parts don't feel sexual, and you're stretched out, and you're exhausted, and you crawl in bed, and you like want to fall over, and last thing you want to do is be sexual. And not to mention that your estrogen levels are going crazy post-birth, right? So they're dropped, and so they typically during young childhood they stay pretty low, and then they start to go back up during adolescence, right? They start to go up because you gain a little bit more physical energy, less emotional energy, but more physical energy, and then it hits a high again during empty nesters when the kids leave, and then it starts to go back down again in late life. Just because of physical, you just can't physically perform in the way that you used to be able. Okay, so it's starting to look inconsistent, right? You got a monthly rhythm that's inconsistent, then you take that, you layer over that, the life development, and then you add on top of that stress. Stress will lower arousal like nothing, right? And like nothing else. Stress impacts arousal, lifespan impacts arousal, and then natural menstrual cycle impacts natural levels of arousal. So is sex stable? No, don't count on it, right? Because there's gonna be times when it's low, and there's gonna be times when it's high, and it's like the Catholic Church, the Orthodox Church, they feast and famine all the time to remind themselves that they're not prisoners to their passions. And so within sexuality, part of the inconsistency of the rhythm of sexuality is to remind us that we are not prisoners to our passions. And that the one thing that we need to stay passionate about is love. And that love is not based on the natural rhythm of the female menstrual cycle. Love is not based on lifespan development. It's not based on stress sometimes. Right? But love can be promoted and connection can be maintained through all these elements. The intellectual, emotional, and the spiritual intimacy can be maintained through all these elements, but the actual sexual intimacy is most likely to be impacted by all these things. And so it's very inconsistent. And when it's there, it's like feast. Right? You never get over-habituated. If you have too much sex, you're going to get over-habituated. Your arousal template's going to get too high. And when your arousal template gets too high, then you can only feel the physical sensations of the dopamine without that level on the arousal template. So if the arousal template is 0 to 10, times abstinence return the arousal template down to a healthy level of experiencing pleasurable sensations at a lower level of experience. Does that make sense? So holding hands can feel good. Right? The guy that had $600 and some, right, lost his ability to experience joy from non-sexual touch. Because his arousal template just went up and up and up and up. And so when dopamine floods the prefrontal cortex, what happens? We create new dopamine receptor sites. So we produce more dopamine by having more sex. We produce more dopamine receptor sites, and then when we have less pleasurable things, they don't feel good. So we have to have the same pleasurable things or a higher pleasurable thing in order to produce the same feeling. And so within the rhythm of this, there's always times of abstinence to re-habituate yourself back to the level of putting sex where it belongs. Even from a neurological and chemical level, right? So that you can continue to re-experience the simple pleasures of love. Any questions about this? You guys buying off on this?
Yeah.
It's like super helpful. Like, I wish someone would have told me this. I thought it was like, you know, for both of us. And for men, it's interesting. They did this study a number of years ago called the Coolidge effect. Can I tell you this? This is they were watching roosters and their mating patterns, and male roosters could, after mating, they couldn't get re-aroused unless they were introduced to a novel female. But if they were introduced to a novel female, they could get re-aroused, right? But they had to stay with the same female hen, right? Then they couldn't get re-aroused, which habituated them from their arousal template going too high, right? So these roosters that kept being introduced to these novel females, they're like the craziest roosters of the bunch. The ones that that didn't have a novel female to access, they were the most tame and healthiest roosters of them all. Isn't that interesting, right? And so monogamy perpetuates, right? Habituating your sexuality down to a level that's manageable. If it's available whenever you want it, however you want it, then this goes up, right? The arousal template goes up, and that impacts you. So that's also the problem with pornography. That's why men or anybody who uses pornography doesn't stay on one side. They click around because they can't get re-aroused until they get a new novel female. So they'll click all the way around, and there's lots of different images they can see, and every time they click to a new image, they can get re-aroused. In fact, they can have orgasm and get re-aroused to another orgasm with a novel female. But if you stay on the same female, they won't get re-aroused. Which is actually good if it's actual sex, because it produces cuddling and holding and connecting, rather than leaving to explore the new novel female. It facilitates and encourages connection, the fact that you lose sexual arousal following sex. Because something needs to be in its place. Okay. So 3 functions of sex talk about arousal, connection, procreation. Our culture is big on arousal, disconnects procreation from connection. All right. So here's the sexual cycle. This is what the diagnostic manual used for dysfunction. So the sexual cycle is made up of basically 4 parts. You have desire, and desire turns into arousal, and arousal turns into orgasm, and some people have additional 5th site, which is plateau, before orgasm, and then resolution. Okay, so this is basically the sexual cycle. So if you're going to diagnose somebody with a disorder, sexual disorder is going to land in desire, arousal, orgasm. There is no disorder of resolution, but there should be. Okay, so it goes around like that. And so in order for the full cycle to go through, desire, arousal, orgasm, and 20 minutes for a woman, to get through this, 7 minutes for a man, which means the man has to be patient. That's like the female body is not ready to be touched until it's at the proper time in the sexual cycle. So like, you know, the way the movies portray it,